Amelia Vance, 28, moved through the controlled chaos of downtown Chicago with an almost imperceptible rhythm, a quiet efficiency honed by years of striving. Her daily life was a meticulously orchestrated symphony of purpose, each note played with unwavering commitment. Each morning, just as the first blush of dawn stretched across Lake Michigan, painting the sky in hues of rose and lavender, she was already up. Her compact one-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park, with its view of leafy streets and quaint brownstones rather than the imposing skyline, was a sanctuary of quiet ambition. It was here she plotted her future, fueling it with a strong, dark roast coffee and a quick scan of the financial news, tracking market trends and interest rates with focused intensity. Then came the familiar commute on the L train, the rhythmic rumble and metallic clatter a backdrop to her mental review of the day's agenda, a final check of her meticulously organized calendar. She worked at Veridian Marketing Solutions, a formidable player in the cutthroat world of digital strategy, located in one of the gleaming glass towers that punctuated the city's heart, a monument to corporate ambition. As a senior project manager, Amelia was the silent, indispensable engine behind many of Veridian's most lauded campaigns. Her colleagues knew her as sharp, detail-oriented, and unflappable, a woman who could untangle the most Gordian knots of data, client demands, and interdepartmental complexities with an almost surgical precision. She wasn't one for outwardly flamboyant gestures or engaging in the superficial office politics that often consumed her peers. Instead, she preferred her work to speak for itself, a quiet resilience forged by years of hard work and self-reliance. Her family, rooted in a modest farming community upstate, had instilled in her a fierce work ethic and an unshakable sense of integrity, but not the means for a comfortable start. Every dollar saved, every professional step forward, every bit of respect earned was entirely her own doing. The dream of owning her own small condo, a tangible piece of stability against the city's relentless churn, fueled her relentless drive, a beacon in her meticulously planned future. The shadow that sometimes fell across her otherwise bright professional path was Marcus Thorne, the vice president of client relations. Marcus, a charismatic man in his late 40s with a booming laugh and an ever-present, perfectly tailored suit that seemed to radiate confidence, was the public face of their department. He was lauded by senior management for his visionary leadership, his ability to schmooze with the best, and his magnetic presence in client meetings. Amelia, however, saw the intricate, often messy machinery behind the polished curtain. Marcus excelled at the grand pronouncements, the high-level strategizing that often lacked granular detail or practical application. He was a master at delegation, which usually meant offloading the painstaking, complex execution onto his team, particularly Amelia. She'd observed his consistent pattern: charm the client with audacious promises, set ambitious, sometimes wildly unrealistic, expectations, then rely entirely on his team to pull off miracles, always ready to bask in the glory and, crucially, to deflect blame when things inevitably veered off course. He often referred to his own astrological sign, Sagittarius, implying a free-spirited, big-picture approach above mere details. A subtle, constant jab, Amelia felt, at her own meticulous, data-driven nature. He embodied the corporate archetype of all talk, no trousers. The tension began to coil tightly during the preparation for the Aegis financial pitch. Aegis was a colossal opportunity, a multi-million-dollar account that Veridian desperately needed to secure its Q3 revenue targets and boost its market valuation. Amelia had poured weeks, even months, of her life into this one project. She meticulously analyzed intricate market trends, crunched reams of financial data from disparate sources, crafted a bespoke digital strategy tailored to Aegis's unique market position, and designed a presentation deck that was not just visually stunning, but also analytically watertight. Every slide, every data point, every projected metric was cross-referenced, triple-verified, and backed by irrefutable evidence. She had anticipated every possible client question, preparing comprehensive answers and backup data sets, organized in a sleek digital annex that could be accessed at a moment's notice. She often worked late into the nights, the glow of her monitor illuminating the deserted office floor, the only sounds the hum of servers and the distant sirens of the city. The day of the presentation, a crisp October morning, was thick with nervous energy that permeated every corner of the usually bustling office. The executive conference room, typically a bastion of casual brainstorming, was transformed into a high-stakes arena. Polished mahogany gleamed under the recessed lighting, the air hushed with anticipation, permeated by the faint, expensive scent of artisanal coffee and a subtle undercurrent of corporate anxiety. Marcus, visibly stressed beneath his confident veneer, paced the room, occasionally snapping at junior team members for minor infractions, his usual charm replaced by a brittle impatience. Amelia sat quietly at the table, her own meticulously prepared binder open on her lap, a silent guardian of truth and data, her heart a steady drumbeat against her ribs. The presentation started smoothly, Marcus charming the Aegis executives with his usual blend of gravitas and wit, effortlessly gliding through the opening slides. But then, as he delved into the projected return on investment for a specific digital campaign, a senior Aegis executive, a sharp-eyed woman named Miss Chen, known for her incisive questioning, interjected. "Mr. Thorne," she began, her voice calm but penetrating, cutting through the smooth corporate patter, "your projected growth for Q4 seems notably optimistic, particularly when considering the current market headwinds in the fintech sector. Specifically, the data point on slide 27 regarding projected user acquisition in the digital wealth management space appears inconsistent with our internal research and broader industry analysis." Marcus, caught completely off guard, stumbled visibly. His usual smooth delivery faltered, a telltale flush creeping up his neck. He looked at the offending slide, then back at Miss Chen, a bead of sweat forming on his temple. He had glanced at Amelia's carefully compiled summary notes, but he hadn't fully internalized the granular detail, trusting his charisma to carry him through. Amelia's heart pounded in her chest. She knew the exact discrepancy Miss Chen was referring to, and she had the corrected, more conservative, yet still impressively robust, figure ready at her fingertips. She subtly pushed her binder slightly forward on the table, her eyes meeting Marcus's, a silent, urgent offer of help, a lifeline of accurate information. He saw her, saw the binder, and irritation, then annoyance, crossed his face. He misinterpreted her attempt as a challenge, an undermining of his authority in front of a critical client. His ego, fragile beneath its bluster, took over. "Amelia," he said, his voice laced with a condescending sweetness that felt like a sharp, public slap, a dismissal of her very presence. "Calm down, there's no need to be so sensitive about every little detail. I've got this." He even chuckled, a hollow, grating sound that bounced off the polished walls, designed to trivialize her. "Some people," he added, with a dismissive wave of his hand towards her, a subtle, calculated public humiliation, "get too caught up in the minutiae. My assistant is a Sagittarius, too, takes everything so personally, right? We need to look at the big picture here, the grand vision, not get bogged down." He then proceeded to improvise, pulling a wildly inaccurate figure from thin air, attempting to bluff his way through the crisis. The figure he cited was not just optimistic, it was demonstrably false, a glaring fabrication. Miss Chen's expression hardened, her polite curiosity replaced by a visible skepticism. The other Aegis executives exchanged uneasy glances. The room suddenly felt several degrees colder, the air thick with unspoken disappointment. The rest of the presentation limped to a conclusion, the initial momentum and trust irrevocably lost. As the Aegis team politely but coolly excused themselves, their smiles no longer reaching their eyes, Amelia knew with a sickening certainty. The account was lost. Not because of a flawed strategy, but because of Marcus Thorne's colossal hubris, his blatant incompetence, and his disastrous public improvisation. Later that afternoon, the office felt like a mausoleum, the usual vibrant energy replaced by a palpable tension. Marcus, red-faced and seething, called Amelia into his glass-walled office, the door clicking shut behind her, sealing her fate. He didn't yell, he was far worse. His voice was dangerously low, a venomous hiss. "Amelia," he began, "you made me look bad in there. Your little show, trying to correct me, that was unprofessional. You should have anticipated my needs, not tried to undermine me, making a spectacle of yourself." He then leaned back in his expensive leather chair, a sneer playing on his lips, a look of utter disdain. "Honestly, you're just too sensitive. Some people just aren't cut out for this level of pressure, Amelia. Maybe you're just too sensitive for the big leagues. It's like I said in the meeting, you're just too emotional, just like my Sagittarian assistant. You take things too personally. Perhaps this isn't the right environment for you." He chuckled again, a cruel, dismissive sound that echoed in the quiet, glass-encased office, meant to cut her to her core. The following week, the official blow landed, a corporate coup de grace. The Aegis account, as predicted, went to a rival firm. Marcus, a master of corporate spin, managed to deflect the blame upwards and sideways. He crafted an internal memo subtly implying unforeseen market shifts and client misalignment, with a thinly veiled suggestion that data integrity issues, originating from Amelia's department, of course, a clear accusation without direct names, had played a minor, but crucial, role. The real, crushing insult came when Amelia was called into HR. She was blindsided by a performance warning, citing interpersonal communication issues and lack of team cohesion, specifically with Marcus. The implication was clear. She was difficult, a problem employee, unable to work effectively with visionary leadership. Her annual bonus, crucial for her condo savings, was brutally slashed by 60%, a direct hit to her dreams. The promotion she had been working towards, a senior project lead role, was put on hold indefinitely, her career trajectory abruptly halted. Marcus, meanwhile, was lauded in a company-wide email from the CEO for handling a difficult client situation with grace and professionalism, and received a significant bonus for his resilience. The injustice was a palpable weight. Amelia walked out of the HR office in a daze, the fluorescent lights of the corridor blurring into streaky, oppressive lines. The crisp Chicago air did nothing to clear the suffocating sense of injustice, the burning shame that coiled in her gut. She rode the L train home, staring blankly out at the passing cityscape, seeing nothing, feeling everything. Her carefully constructed world, her years of relentless efforts, her quiet ambitions, all seemed to crumble around her, reduced to dust by a single arrogant man. The phrase "too sensitive" echoed in her ears, each syllable a fresh, searing sting, an insult to her intelligence, her dedication, her very being. Marcus's condescending chuckle, his casual dismissal of her detailed, flawless work, the infuriating implication that her thoroughness was a flaw rather than a strength, it was all a bitter, indigestible pill, poisoning her sense of purpose. Back in her apartment, the sanctuary felt hollow, tainted by the day's events. She stared at the small savings account growing painstakingly, now significantly diminished, a harsh reminder of her setback. The image of the condo she had dreamt of, a tangible place of her own, a testament to her independence and success, blurred through hot, angry tears. For hours, she sat there, the city lights beginning to glitter outside her window, a silent, glittering witness to her devastation. Quitting seemed like the only option, a desperate escape from the toxic environment, a way to reclaim her dignity. But then, a thought surfaced, sharp and clear through the haze of despair, like a shard of ice. Quitting would be a surrender. It would allow Marcus Thorne to continue his destructive cycle, to exploit and discard others as he had her, completely unburdened. He would simply move on, unaffected, his arrogance unchecked, his corporate ascent unimpeded. As the night deepened, Amelia's tears dried, replaced by a cold, resolute fire that began to burn in her gut, stoking a new kind of purpose. She thought of every instance of Marcus's manipulative behavior. The credit he stole, the the blame he deflected, the corners he cut. She remembered his casual disregard for facts, his preference for bluster over substance. And she remembered her own meticulous habits. Not just a job requirement, but an ingrained, almost compulsive part of who she was. She documented everything. Not out of paranoia, but out of a deep-seated need for accuracy, for accountability, and a quiet understanding that details, often overlooked and dismissed by the big-picture types, were the true anchors of reality. Every project plan, every email exchange, every data verification, every minor instruction or lack thereof from Marcus, every casual comment. It was all there, filed away, either digitally on her encrypted personal drives or in physical binders she kept at home, organized with the precision of a forensic archivist. Her hidden advantage wasn't a sudden stroke of luck or a mysterious benefactor appearing from the shadows. It was her own innate, unglamorous strength. Her methodical nature, her unwavering commitment to facts, her almost photographic memory for data. Marcus thrived on the ambiguity and subjective interpretations of corporate success. Amelia thrived on verifiable facts. He saw her meticulousness as sensitivity, a weakness, an impediment to his grand, unscrutinized vision. She now understood it was her superpower, a shield and a sword in one. She started her new project, a silent, covert operation aimed not at revenge for revenge's sake, not at a petty triumph, but at justice, at rebalancing the scales, at making sure the truth, finally, had its undeniable day. She would not just leave Viridian, she would orchestrate an exit that would expose Marcus Thorne for exactly what he was, a corporate parasite. Her first step was to systematically audit her own personal archives, a digital deep dive into years of work. She had encrypted digital backups of every significant email communication, especially where Marcus had given vague, contradictory instructions, then criticized her, or where she had flagged potential issues he blithely dismissed. She had the original, validated Aegis data, clearly showing her correct, carefully projected figures versus Marcus's fabricated ones. She had meeting notes, meticulously dated and cross-referenced, outlining her contributions and his subsequent diversions or misrepresentations. This was not a collection of grievances, it was an evidentiary record. But she needed more than just her own defense. She needed to expose his systemic modus operandi. Marcus's visionary approach often meant he delegated the dirty work, the tedious but crucial financial reporting and compliance tasks, to junior staff, then only reviewed the high-level summaries. Amelia knew he had a habit of optimizing numbers on less scrutinized projects. Minor budgetary fudges, slight reclassifications of expenses to flatter his department's bottom line, or aggressively interpreted revenue recognition rules to inflate his department's performance metrics. These were not outright fraud, but they skirted ethical lines and, collectively, could constitute a serious breach of company policy, potentially inviting audits and fines. She had, on several occasions, internally reported minor discrepancies to her immediate superior, David Chen, who, intimidated by Marcus's influence and eager to avoid conflict, had managed them quietly, ensuring they never reached a higher level of scrutiny. Amelia, ever the meticulous documentarian, had kept detailed records of these reports, logging the dates, the issues, and David's responses. These incidents, individually minor, collectively built a compelling, undeniable pattern of systemic corner-cutting and ethical laxity driven by Marcus's relentless pursuit of inflated metrics and personal glory. She realized her target had to be carefully chosen, timed for maximum impact. She couldn't just drop a bomb and walk away. She needed the bomb to detonate at the precise moment of maximum vulnerability, not just for Marcus, but also to protect her own professional reputation. She needed to make it utterly impossible for Viridian to ignore. Her gaze fell upon the Atlas Initiative, a colossal digital transformation project that had just been greenlit, touted as Viridian's most ambitious undertaking. It was Viridian's flagship project for the coming year, absolutely critical for their Q4 earnings, their stock price, and their long-term strategic positioning in the market. Marcus had grandly announced himself as the lead, naturally, relying heavily, almost exclusively, on Amelia and her team for its intricate, data-intensive implementation. This was her perfect window. This was where she could make his incompetence a glaring, undeniable liability. Over the next 2 months, Amelia worked with a quiet, steely focus, a strategist on a covert mission. She maintained her impeccable professional facade at Veridian, performing her duties flawlessly, even helping Marcus navigate the initial complexities of the Atlas initiative, all while observing, gathering, and planning. But beneath this surface, her carefully constructed plan was unfolding with silent precision. She discreetly connected with former colleagues and mentors, particularly Brenda Sterling, a woman of sharp intellect and unwavering ethics, who had left Veridian 2 years prior to start her own successful boutique consultancy, disillusioned by increasing corporate politics and lack of transparency. Brenda listened carefully as Amelia, in a guarded conversation over coffee at a quiet spot in River North, described her recent experience, carefully omitting names but providing enough detail for Brenda to understand the dynamic. Brenda, wise to the corporate machinations, offered invaluable advice. Document everything, Amelia. The truth has a way of finding its light, but only if you provide the path. And make sure your next step is a strong one. Don't leave a void, step into a better future. Amelia also began a discreet, strategic job search, not out of desperation, but as an integral part of her strategic exit. She wasn't just looking for any job. She was looking for a company that genuinely valued integrity and skill, a place where she could truly thrive, free from the toxic shadow of a Marcus Thorne. She secured several interviews and, after a rigorous process, accepted an offer from Catalyst Creative, a smaller, highly regarded rival firm known for its ethical practices, employee-centric culture, and innovative approach. The role was similar, a senior project manager, but with more autonomy, a clear path to leadership, and a substantial pay bump that would finally put her condo dream firmly within reach. She didn't inform Veridian of her new employment. Not yet. Her next step was subtle, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye, but devastatingly effective. As she continued to lay the groundwork for the Atlas initiative, the project that would make or break Veridian's year, she made a series of minor, seemingly innocuous changes within the project's complex digital framework. These weren't malicious acts in the traditional sense. They were merely rerouting specific data streams to non-standard directories, altering the naming conventions of certain critical files to obscure but logically consistent, to her, sequences, or adjusting access permissions for particular datasets to a slightly more obscure nested folder structure that required specific, non-obvious navigation. These were the kinds of mistakes that a highly stressed, overworked employee, facing a relentless deadline and a demanding boss, might plausibly make while nearing their breaking point. Mistakes that, for anyone else trying to take over the project cold, would lead to significant delays, confusion, and data bottlenecks, effectively sandbagging the initiative without leaving any overtly malicious digital footprint. Only Amelia, with her encyclopedic knowledge of the system and her meticulous documentation, would be able to untangle them swiftly and efficiently. She ensured all these changes were logged under her user ID, plausible as legitimate modifications that had simply been misplaced or mislabeled in the scramble of a high-pressure environment. The Atlas initiative was now in its critical implementation phase, mere weeks away from its crucial internal review, where all stakeholders, including the CEO and the board, would evaluate its progress and preliminary metrics. Marcus, ever the showman, had scheduled a grand presentation, promising to unveil impressive early metrics and a flawlessly executed initial rollout. He was relying almost entirely on Amelia to deliver the complex, integrated data dashboards, the crucial analytics, and the smooth system functionality for this high-stakes review. Without her, the presentation would be an empty shell. Then, on a Tuesday morning, exactly 2 weeks before the Atlas Initiative's critical review. A timing Amelia had calculated with chilling precision, Amelia walked into Veridian and tendered her resignation. Her notice was precise, professional, and entirely unexpected by Marcus, who heard the news from a stunned HR representative. The timing was deliberate, designed to leave Marcus with just enough time to realize he was utterly dependent on her, and then to feel the full, crushing weight of her absence and the impending disaster. The exit interview, the one Marcus had once joked about with such dismissive arrogance, was scheduled for her very last day. It was with Miss Jenkins from HR, a seasoned veteran of corporate disputes, and David Chen, her direct department head, a man Amelia knew secretly chafed under Marcus's overbearing, credit-stealing style. Marcus himself was conspicuously absent, likely believing the interview was a mere formality for a too sensitive employee. Amelia sat across the polished conference table, calm and composed, her posture radiating in quiet confidence that belied the churning emotions of months prior. She formally confirmed her resignation, reiterated her gratitude for opportunities given, and expressed her decision to pursue a new role that aligned more closely with her professional growth and ethical values. Then Miss Jenkins, following standard protocol, asked, her voice measured, "Amelia, can you share any specific reasons for your departure? Perhaps where Veridian could improve. We value honest feedback." Amelia took a deep, steadying breath. This was it, the moment of truth. She didn't raise her voice, didn't show anger, didn't allow a single note of bitterness to creep into her tone. She simply, methodically, opened her meticulously organized binder, filled with tabbed sections and neatly typed summaries, and placed it on the table. It wasn't a rant, it was a dossier. It was indisputable evidence. "Miss Jenkins, Mr. Chen," she began, her voice steady and clear, carrying the weight of unvarnished truth, "I've always been committed to Veridian's success and integrity. However, I've encountered patterns of behavior and management practices that I believe are detrimental to both the company's long-term health and the morale of its dedicated employees. My decision to leave is not made lightly, but with a firm belief in the necessity of accountability." She then proceeded to lay out her case, an unfolding narrative of corporate malfeasance. She started with the Aegis financial incident. She presented her original, verified data alongside clear, dated notes of Marcus's disastrous improvisation. She showed time-stamped emails where she had preemptively offered the correct information, only to be publicly dismissed and humiliated. She referenced his specific, sneering comment, "Too sensitive," and his subsequent, calculated framing of her as difficult and insubordinate in the HR meeting that followed. She presented the performance warning she unjustly received, contrasting it starkly with Marcus's undeserved bonus for handling the situation, a clear reward for failure and deception. Then, she moved to the more systemic issues, the insidious rot beneath the polished corporate surface. She presented documented instances of Marcus's creative accounting, the subtle but significant misclassifications of expenses to artificially deflate project costs, the aggressive revenue recognition on smaller projects that skirted company policy and accounting standards. She showed her internal reports on these matters, dated and time-stamped, which had been quietly suppressed by David Chen, who now visibly winced. She demonstrated precisely how these actions, while individually not always illegal, collectively created a pervasive culture of dishonesty, short-term gains at the expense of long-term ethical standing, and potential legal exposure. She detailed the waste of company resources, the inflated budgets under his purview, and the demoralization of junior staff who were subtly pressured to implement these dubious practices. She paused, allowing the sheer volume and weight of the evidence to settle in the stunned silence of the room. "I believe deeply in Veridian's mission and its potential," she concluded, her gaze unwavering, "and I cannot in good conscience be complicit in practices that undermine it. My sensitivity, as Mr. Thorne so casually put it, extends to the integrity of my work, the ethical standards of my employer, and the fair treatment of my colleagues." It is not a weakness. It is a principle. Miss Jenkins, initially maintaining a professional poker face, now looked visibly unsettled, her professional composure cracking under the deluge of irrefutable facts. David Chen, Amelia's direct superior, stared at the documents spread across the table, a dawning, horrified realization in his eyes. He knew bits and pieces of this, had felt the pressure, had even participated in the cover-ups to protect his own position, but seeing it all laid out, systematically, meticulously, was an undeniable, damning indictment. The sheer volume, the precision, and the irrefutable nature of the evidence were overwhelming. Every single claim was backed by undeniable proof: dated emails, precise system logs, verified data sets, internal memos, and cross-referenced project plans. Then came the final, crucial, devastating piece of the puzzle. Furthermore, Amelia stated, her voice dropping slightly, imbued with a hint of concern for the company, I must warn you that the Atlas Initiative, a project I have largely been responsible for implementing, is currently structured in a way that will make it extremely difficult for anyone else to take over immediately. Due to Mr. Thorne's constant, often contradictory, demands for expedited results and his insistence on bypassing standard protocols, I had to implement certain unconventional shortcuts and unique, highly customized file management systems to meet his unrealistic expectations. These systems, while functional under my direct oversight, are not intuitively navigable for an external user. She didn't confess to malice. She framed it as an inevitable consequence of his own pressure, and her mistakes as a stressed, overworked employee doing her best under impossible conditions. She then hinted at the specific, minor but critically impactful, mislabeled file paths and subtly rerouted data streams, knowing full well that they would cause immediate, systemic chaos without her specific, proprietary knowledge. She offered, in a final act of professional courtesy, a single, carefully redacted document, a basic, generalized guide to navigating some of the internal complexities, making it seem like a gesture of goodwill, rather than a partial roadmap to a hidden minefield. I trust you understand the implications, she finished quietly. The revelation about the Atlas Initiative hit Miss Jenkins and David Chen like a freight train. The most important project of the year stalled just weeks before its critical, public review. The implications for Q4 earnings, for investor confidence, for the CEO's standing, were catastrophic. It wasn't just Marcus's ethical lapses. It was his direct, immediate, and utterly devastating impact on the company's most vital current project and its immediate financial future. They now understood the true, terrifying cost of his visionary leadership and big-picture approach. Amelia Vance walked out of Veridian Marketing Solutions for the last time with a profound sense of calm, the cool autumn air balm on her face. The crushing weight she had carried for months, the silent burden of injustice, was finally lifted. It wasn't about a triumphant, gloating revenge. It was about standing up for truth, for integrity, and for herself. It was about accountability. The consequences for Marcus Thorne were swift and brutally efficient. The very next day, the Atlas Initiative hit an insurmountable wall. Key data dashboards were inaccessible. Crucial files couldn't be located in the labyrinthine system Amelia had optimized. And the project management platform, which only Amelia had truly mastered, became a bewildering, impenetrable mess for anyone else. The internal review, scheduled to be Marcus's crowning glory, was an unmitigated disaster, exposing his utter lack of control and understanding. The CEO, furious at the prospect of significant financial losses and reputational damage, demanded immediate answers. Miss Jenkins and David Chen, armed with Amelia's meticulously compiled dossier, had their irrefutable evidence. An emergency, high-level investigation was launched. Marcus was immediately put on administrative leave, his company access revoked within hours. The creative accounting on his past projects was meticulously re-audited, revealing a clear, undeniable pattern of deliberate misrepresentation and policy violations that, while narrowly avoiding criminal charges, constituted gross professional negligence and a flagrant breach of company ethics. The Aegis debacle was re-examined, with Amelia's original, correct data proving his direct responsibility for the lost multi-million-dollar account, exposing his lies and spin. His carefully cultivated image of a visionary leader shattered, replaced by the grim reality of an incompetent, arrogant fraudster. Within a week, Marcus Thorne was quietly, unceremoniously, let go from Viridian, his name now synonymous with failure and deceit across the competitive Chicago marketing industry. No reputable company would touch him with a 10-foot pole. His career, built on smoke and mirrors, had finally collapsed. Viridian Marketing Solutions suffered significantly. The Atlas initiative, critically delayed and compromised, cost them substantial revenue in Q4, leading to a dip in their stock price and a blow to their market confidence. They faced the arduous task of rebuilding trust, both internally and externally. But for Amelia, the outcome was one of profound liberation. At Catalyst Creative, she thrived. Her meticulousness, once dismissed as sensitivity and a flaw, was celebrated as her greatest asset, her superpower. Her analytical skills were fully utilized on challenging, impactful projects. Her innovative ideas heard, respected, and genuinely valued. She learned that true power wasn't in crushing others, but in knowing your worth, acting with unwavering integrity, and choosing your battles wisely. The condo, once a distant, frustrating dream, was now not just within reach, but a certainty, a tangible symbol of her resilience and hard-won success. Sometimes, walking along Lake Michigan in the evenings, the cool breeze whipping off the dark, churning water, the city lights a dazzling, unapologetic display of human ambition, she would recall Marcus's sneering remark. Too sensitive. She would smile, a quiet, knowing smile. Her sensitivity, her deep-seated refusal to let injustice stand, her unwavering commitment to truth had not been a weakness. It had been her greatest weapon. The exit interview hadn't been a joke. It had been the turning point, the carefully orchestrated moment when the truth finally caught up to arrogance. And for Amelia Vance, it was just the beginning of a life built on her own unwavering terms, a testament to the quiet strength of integrity.